So at the time when Brzezinski was coming up with these strategy ideas in the late 90s, right? There was a guy named George Kennan who you may or may not know about, but I'm going to explain who he is for you. George Kennan was the most important diplomat of the second half of the 20th century for the United States. He wrote something called The Long Cable from Moscow. I think it was in 1946 after the fall. So the World War II was over, and the Soviets are clearly now amassing military force to take more and more territory in Eastern Europe, and very clearly a communist empire that's seeking to expand its reach. His long cable is like an 8,000 word telegram. Back then, we didn't have the email and stuff. They did things by telegrams. And so it was called a cable because it was transmitted over a cable. That was a short name for it, right? So this cable basically laid out the Cold War and how we were going to oppose the Soviet Union with soft power and indirect hard power. In other words, by arming their adversaries wherever they were fighting, but not fighting them directly. And this is how the Cold War architecture was created and became policy for the United States. George Kennan is considered one of the leading experts on Russia, the Soviets, anybody. By the way, he doesn't come from an Eastern European nation where he hates the Russians. He's a cold realist. By the way, he was such an enemy of the Soviets and the communists. To think that he would flip and become their ally is to miss what actually happened here. So I'm going to read you something from him now. And I know this may seem maybe, not the most viral video I could ever do in my life, but dude, you've got to understand this if you're ever going to get anywhere in understanding how we got here. So George Kennan was still very active in U.S. diplomacy in the 90s, in and around those circles, intellectual circles, academic circles, policy circles. And so he comes out very strongly in the late 90s and is like, this is insanity. And I want to read to you what George Kennan said at the time. I think it is the beginning of a new Cold War, Kennan said from his Princeton home. I think the Russians will gradually react quite adversely, and it will affect their policies. I think it is a tragic mistake. There was no reason whatsoever for this. No one was threatening anybody whatsoever. The expansion would make the founding fathers of this country turn over in their graves. We have signed up to protect a whole series of countries, even though we have neither the resources nor the intention to do so in any serious way. NATO expansion was simply a lighthearted action by a Senate that had no real interest in foreign affairs. He goes on, I was particularly bothered by the reference to Russia as a country dying to attack Western Europe.